We are the Guinea Pig Collective. All will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Searching for old treasures, blowing off the dust. Timeless stories and legendary characters. This is Talking Movies. Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another Talking Movies. So on today's Talking Movies, we will be talking about the Hampton Fancher David Webb Peoples adaptation of the novel by Philip K. Dick, directed by Ridley Scott, 1982 Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard, Rutger Hauer as Roy Batty, Sean Young as Rachel, Edward James Olmos as Gaff, M. Emmett Walsh as Byron, Daryl Hannah as Pris, William Sanderson as J.F. Sebastian, Brian James as Leon Kowalski, Joe Turkel as Dr. Eldon Tyrell, Joanne Cassidy as Zora, James Hong as Hannibal Chu, Morgan Paul as Holden, Kevin Thompson as Bear, John Edward Allen as Kaiser, and Hi Pike as Taffy Lewis. This is just another one of those fun 1980s style dystopian future movies that were most definitely in vogue at the time. You need look no further than The Road Warrior with Mel Gibson, Cyborg with Jean-Claude Van Damme, Escape from New York with Kurt Russell, and of course a whole host of other movies that were in this same vein. And of course, as always, the movie goes as such. In the 21st century, a corporation develops androids to be used as slaves in colonies outside of the Earth, identified as replicants. In 2019, a former police officer is hired to hunt down a fugitive group of replicants living under cover in Los Angeles, California. Now, this movie, of course, like I said, is a dystopian type future where everything is a little bit more grimy and dirty and gritty than you would expect the future to look like. This just seemed to be the vision for most writers and directors and creators of these types of works at the time. Now, of course, most of these things came down from novels that were written beforehand where they foreseen a future that was going to be pretty sad and almost hopeless seeming. And Harrison Ford's character of Rick Deckard is a former Blade Runner who is called out of retirement when the four known replicants, most combat models, have made their way back to Earth, and they begin to cause a bit of trouble and they must be taken offline. This, of course, is very dangerous work because the replicants possess strength and intelligence far superior than to most humans. So the way the movie and the settings went in this movie, it was very reminiscent of what people might call cyberpunk today, or even that whole steampunk type feel of everything in the movie, the way it was set up. It comes across as very genuine and almost real in the way that you're watching this movie, because you really feel that you could be in this setting because it just seems so down to earth and dirty and grimy and, well, real. Now, of course, while there are elements of the future like flying cars and these special type of guns that Deckard uses, which are just modified actual handguns, it is done in a way that actually makes it all seem very believable. So what are some of the things about this movie that were kind of strange? So director Ridley Scott and director of photography Jordan Cronenweth achieved the famous shining eyes effect by using a technique invented by Fritz Lang known as the Schuften process. Light is bounced into the actors' and actresses' eyes off of a piece of half-mirrored glass mounted at a 45-degree angle to the camera. Sometimes practical is always the best way to do something. And at around 38 minutes after Pris, Daryl Hannah, meets J.F. Sebastian, William Sanderson, she runs away from him, skidding into his car and smashing the window with her elbow. This was a genuine mistake caused by Hannah slipping on the wet ground. The glass wasn't breakaway glass, it was real glass, and Hannah chipped her elbow in 8 places. She still has a scar from the accident and can be seen in Dangerous Days Making Blade Runner from 2007. Director Ridley Scott and Harrison Ford had disagreements about the script almost from the start. Ford hated the voiceover, which was in early script versions, suggesting that it was better to show most of the things that the voiceover was explaining in order to give Rick Deckard some actual detective work to do. Ford also found working with Scott quite frustrating. Having recently worked with Steven Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola, Ford was used to directors giving him valuable input about his character, whereas Scott was primarily concerned with the sets and pictures. Scott maintained that Ford was a professional actor who didn't need his input. Lastly, Ford was against the idea that Deckard may be a replicant, feeling it undercut the human story of Deckard discovering his lost humanity. Rutger Hauer agreed completely with Ford on this point. According to Ford, Ridley Scott and he agreed prior to shooting that Deckard was not a replicant, but then Scott went and shot it to imply he could be, which disappointed Ford and Hauer. Rutger Hauer came up with many inventive ideas for his characterization, like the moment where he grabs and fondles a dove. He also improvised a now iconic line,
"All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain."
He later chose "All Those Moments" as the title of his autobiography. In Philip K. Dick's original novel, animals were virtually extinct, something that this movie only addressed in very subtle ways. The most obvious reference to this animal extinction is when Rick Deckard, Harrison Ford, asks Zora Joanne Cassidy if her snake is real, and she replies, "Do you think I'd be working in a place like this if I could afford one?" Another reference occurs in the scene where Rick Deckard first visits Dr. Eldon Tyrell, Joe Turkel, and he asks Rachel, Sean Young, if their owl is replicated. She responds with, "Of course it is." In Dick's novel, the owls were the first creatures to die out. And according to Rutger Hauer's biography, the final confrontation between Rick Deckard and Roy Batty was to have been a fight in an old gym. Using martial arts like Kung Fu or something similar, Hauer disliked the idea, saying it was too Bruce Lee. He didn't know Kung Fu anyway, and claims to have come up with the idea of Batty chasing Deckard. And the final scene was shot hours before the producers were due to take creative control away from Ridley Scott. If only somebody had stepped in and did that at Lucasfilm. And Joanna Cassidy, Zora, was at ease with the snake around her neck because it was her pet, a Burmese python named Darling. And maybe some of you guys around 420 might find this funny, but at around 47 minutes, the snake scale seen under the electron microscope was actually a marijuana bud. So the term replicants is used nowhere in Philip K. Dick's writing. The creatures in the source novel are called androids or Andes. The movie abandoned these terms, fearing they would sound comical spoken on screen. Replicants came from screenwriter David Webb's Peoples' daughter, Riza, who was studying microbiology and biochemistry. She introduced her father to the theory of replication, the process whereby cells are duplicated for cloning purposes. And although Philip K. Dick saw only the opening 20 minutes of footage prior to his death on March 2nd, 1982, he was extremely impressed and has been quoted by Paul Salmon as saying, "It was my own interior world. They caught it perfectly." However, neither directly Ridley Scott nor screenwriter David Webb Peoples actually read Dick's novel. And might I say, that's a real Dick move. And like so many other films, this movie suffered at the box office because it opened at the same time as E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1982. The Thing, 1982, suffered a similar fate due to the same reason. Although there was praise for the visual style, word of mouth about this movie's slow pace and bleak themes quickly caused a decrease in attendance ratings. Both movies later reached cult status and received critical praise. And of course, as always, there are always some goofs with each movie that's ever made, and this one primarily is centered around the actors' voices and their lips not syncing up. Other small errors include the positions of the chess pieces on Sebastian's board do not match the position on Tyrell's board. And the sheet music that Rachel reads does not match the song that she plays on the piano. And by design, a replicant's lifespan is 4 years. Roy's incept date was January 8th, 2016. It was November 2019 when Roy started to shut down and died without life-threatening injuries. He was 3 years old and should have had up to 2 months of life left. And in a weird twist of circumstances, we lost Rutger Hauer in July 19th of 2019, the same year that Roy Batty died in Blade Runner. Now, while that is a strange coincidence, do not listen to some of the people that say that he died on the exact same month because, well, as you have just heard, it is complete and utter fiction. Anyway, guys, I would like to thank you all.
Thank you very much.
For being here yet again. I hope you've enjoyed this one. And let me know, have you seen this movie? Do you remember this movie? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, as always, my friends, if you've enjoyed what you heard and what you've seen, go ahead and destroy that like button for me. And if you are new to the channel, welcome. Glad that you are here. I hope you've enjoyed yourself and that you will consider subscribing. And I will catch you all next time. Later, y'all.